All right, let's dive deep into the mind of the strategist, this time with Kenichi Ohmae. We're all about unlocking that strategic thinking, especially for those of you battling it out in the business world.
Yeah, Ohmae was a real force, known for, getting straight to the point. And what's interesting is how spot on his ideas still are today. It's
Yeah.
like he was predicting the future or something.
It's pretty amazing, right? Some ideas just, I don't know, they just last. One thing that really stuck with me was this thing Ohmae pointed out about, well, Japanese companies, they were totally dominating the global market, but a lot of the time they didn't even have these huge strategic planning departments like the ones you see in, Western companies. How do you explain that?
Yeah, it's a bit of a head scratcher, right? But Ohmae says it comes down to like a different kind of strategic DNA. They were all about really understanding the market and what he calls those key factors for success, or KFS. So it's more about getting the lay of the land than getting bogged down in these fancy plans.
Okay, so less about the plan itself, more about truly grasping how your market works. And instead of getting lost in all those complicated models, Omei is a big believer in good old-fashioned analysis. Remember that example with the Isushima vacation package?
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
That travel agency offering those fixed packages, but they totally missed what customers actually wanted.
Right. It's such a simple example, but it shows how breaking things down, even something like a vacation package, can uncover some hidden gems, opportunities you wouldn't have seen otherwise. Strategic thinking means taking control, not just going with the flow. Like, are you a passenger or are you in the driver's seat?
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And this whole analytical approach is key for anyone who wants to sharpen those strategic thinking skills, right? Break it down, see the parts, then figure out how to put them back together in a way that gives you an edge.
Totally. It's like taking a clock apart so you can build a better one. But it's not just what we analyze, it's also how we ask the questions. Like with companies struggling with overtime. Instead of that whole, why is there so much overtime thing, Ome says, frame those questions so they actually lead to solutions.
So basically, skip the complaining, go straight to fixing it. That would be a game changer in a lot of companies, right? How many get stuck in the why and never get to the how?
It happens all the time. It's like driving with the parking brake on. But Ome gives us some tools, these core strategies, for breaking free and gaining that competitive edge. A big one is focusing on those key factors for success, those KFS we talked about. So, in any industry, there are these crucial things that really determine success. The key is to figure out what those are for your market and then really go for it.
Makes sense, but how do you know you're picking the right factors to focus on? Seems like you could easily, misinterpret things.
Yeah, and that's where that deep market understanding comes in. There's this great example Ome uses about a copier company. They figured out that their KFS wasn't the price of the copier, but the cost of service. So they completely changed their pricing model, focused on offering amazing service, and it worked.
Now that you mention it, I've heard of that strategy being used in other areas too, like software companies that prioritize customer support over, just adding more and more features. It's thinking outside the box. Omei also talks about building on relative superiority, basically playing to your strengths, right? What's
R-
that all about?
Right, so you don't always have to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes the smartest move is to just double down on what you're already good at. And that can help you carve out your own space in the market. It's about taking what you're good at and making it, I don't know, even better, something others can't easily copy.
So it's not just about being good, it's about being uniquely good,
Right.
right? But then there's that other strategy, pursuing aggressive initiatives. Sounds a bit risky.
Well, it can be, but Omei isn't saying be reckless. It's more about constantly challenging the status quo, asking why all the time to find those hidden opportunities to innovate. Like, why do fluorescent light bulbs have to be, long and skinny? Why are they like that?
Now that you mention it, yeah, they've been that way forever. Why haven't they changed?
Exactly. Or think about movies. Why do we always watch them in the dark? Sometimes questioning those things we just take for granted, can lead to breakthroughs that others miss.
Okay, I'm starting to see the power in that. It's like pushing those boundaries, exploring what's possible. And Ome uses some great examples from actual companies, right?
Oh, yeah, tons. Like Toyota's Kanban system, which totally revolutionized manufacturing, or how film processing got transformed from this long, complicated process to something way faster and more efficient. All because someone asked, why?
So it's like these companies have a built-in disruption radar, always looking for ways to improve, to innovate. We've got focusing on KFS, building on what you're already good at, and then this aggressive initiative thing. So that's three. What's that fourth core strategy for gaining a competitive edge?
It's called exploiting strategic degrees of freedom. It's about figuring out where you have the most flexibility to make strategic moves and then going all in on those areas. Like, imagine a chess game. You need to figure out which pieces can really change the game.
So knowing where you have room to maneuver and then using that to your advantage. Like in a crowded market, maybe it's offering an amazing customer experience, something that sets you apart. Or if things are changing really fast, maybe it's being able to adapt quickly to all those new trends.
Exactly. It's all about those leverage points.
You know what? That reminds me of the example with the microwave oven design. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah. That one was a great example of how thinking outside the box, breaking those traditional design boundaries can lead to a really innovative product.
These strategies are all great, but it feels like a lot to manage. How do you make them work together?
Well, that's where Ohmae's strategic triangle comes in. It ties everything together. The whole thing is about understanding how the corporation, the customer, and the competition all interact.
You mentioned that earlier. Sounds simple enough, but I'm sure there's more to it than meets the eye.
Oh, definitely. It helps you analyze any situation, any business situation, by understanding how those three forces interact. The idea is a good strategy aligns your company's strengths with what customers need and gives you an advantage over your competitors.
So it's not just about being good, it's about being good in a way that matters to your customers and sets you apart from the competition. Finding that sweet spot where it all clicks.
Exactly. And then to really make it work, he introduces this idea of strategic planning units or SPUs. It's about organizing your company so you can really address those specific customer groups and handle the competition in each market.
So SBUs are like, I don't know, mini strategy hubs within a bigger company, each focused on a specific part of the market. Makes sense, especially for companies with a lot of different products or services. And it all ties back to that strategic triangle, right?
Right. And there's more. Ome dives deeper into market segmentation, saying that, truly understanding your customers is crucial.
No, this is where it gets interesting, market segmentation. It's something I hear people talk about a lot, but honestly, I'm not sure I totally get it.
Well, it's about understanding that your market isn't just one big group of people. There are different groups, and they all have their own needs, their own motivations, what they're looking for.
So instead of trying to appeal to everyone with the same message, you're tailoring your strategy to resonate with specific groups, like hitting each target audience right in the bullseye.
Exactly. And here's where it gets strategic. Omai says companies often lose market share not because of direct competition, but because they don't keep up with how these market segments change.
So it's like the ground is shifting under your feet, and if you're not paying attention, you're going to fall behind.
He uses a good example of a truck manufacturer that had a tough time because they didn't realize that more and more people were buying trucks for personal use, not just for work.
So even if you're doing everything else right, if you're not aligned with what your target market actually wants, you can still lose. It's a good reminder to stay informed.
Absolutely. And adapt your strategies as you go.
Okay, this is starting to click now. We've got the strategic triangle for understanding the whole market, SPUs for focusing on specific parts of it, and market segmentation for tailoring your strategy to specific groups. But how do you actually put all of this into action? It's one thing to understand it, but another to, get results.
Well, that's where those functional strategies and resource allocation really come into play. You've got this great plan, but it's just a plan, right? Unless you've got the right people and the resources to make it happen.
So it's not just about that high-level strategy. It's about making sure all the parts of the company are working together, like I don't know, an orchestra, where every instrument has to be in sync to create the music.
That's a great way to put it. Functional strategies are all about making each department, engineering, sales, marketing, all of them work as efficiently as possible so they all contribute to that bigger strategy.
So everyone's on the same page, playing their part. What about resource allocation? Isn't that where things can get, I don't know, a little tricky? Every department probably thinks they deserve the biggest chunk of the budget.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Resource allocation is where the decisions really matter. You've got a limited amount of, well, everything: time, money, people. You've got to decide where to invest those things to get the biggest return. It's like Omei talks about it, like managing those, what are they called, stopcocks?
Hmm.
On an investment tank, you're carefully choosing which areas to open up and let those resources flow.
I like that. So it's not just about spending, it's about spending strategically.
Yeah.
Ohmae used that example with Fujitsu's make-buy policy to illustrate this. Can you refresh my memory on that one?
Oh, yeah. Fujitsu realized they could actually get ahead by changing how they allocated their resources. Instead of trying to make everything themselves, they figured out which parts they should make in-house and which parts they should just, outsource.
Oh.
Ended up saving money and being more efficient.
They focused on their strengths and got help with the rest. It shows how smart resource allocation can really make a difference. It's working smarter, not just harder, right?
Exactly. It's about making those tough choices and putting your energy where it counts.
This all connects back to that bigger picture of strategic thinking. It's not just about having a plan, it's about being flexible, responsive, and, well, seeing those changes coming and knowing how to adjust.
Hmm.
Which kind of makes me wonder, how do you actually get that kind of foresight? We don't exactly have crystal balls, right?
Maybe not crystal balls, but Ohmae gives us some tools that can help us, see what's coming. He makes the point that even with all the data we have now, we can't predict the future perfectly.
So a little humility goes a long way.
Absolutely. Knowing that we don't know everything actually helps us be more adaptable and change our strategies when we get new information. He also reminds us that, change is expensive and it's hard. And sometimes we get stuck, whether it's in our systems or even just our mindsets, and that can stop us from making those smart, forward-thinking decisions.
It's so easy to get comfortable doing things the way you've always done them. But Almai is saying it's not just about making the right decisions, it's about making them at the right time. Timing is key, right?
It really is. Ome says it's so important to recognize those opportunities when they pop up and to be bold enough to make those moves, even when everyone else is hesitating.
He even suggests that sometimes the best time to make a move is when everything seems, really bad.
Hmm.
When everyone else is freaking out, that's when a strategic thinker can take advantage of the situation.
Exactly. It takes courage, conviction, and a willingness to, go against the flow. But those who can do that, they're the ones who can really make a difference.
Okay, that's inspiring, but it also sounds a little intimidating.
Mm.
How do we actually develop that foresight? How do we break free from that here and now and start thinking ahead?
Well, he lays out a pretty clear process, 3 steps. First, you've got to define the space you're operating in, that business domain.
So before you even start making a strategy, you need to understand the rules of the game, the boundaries you're working within, like scouting out the terrain before you start the journey.
Right. Once you've got that figured out, the second step is to kind of project those forces that are at work in your business environment. What are the trends, the patterns, those new technologies that are changing your industry? Think about how those things might play out in the future. Make an educated guess about the most likely scenario.
It's like connecting the dots, right?
Yeah.
Trying to create a roadmap for the future, not just reacting to what's happening right now, but anticipating what might happen.
Exactly. And then the final step is to, well, focus your resources on a few key options based on that roadmap you've created. It's about making tough choices, putting your efforts where they'll have the most impact, instead of trying to do everything at once.
Don't put your money on every horse in the race, right?
Mhm.
Pick your winners and back them.
Perfect analogy. Omi's point is that making strategic decisions means taking risks, but calculated ones. It's not about being reckless, it's about making informed choices based on your analysis and your understanding of what's going on.
Okay, so we've got a roadmap for those forward-thinking decisions. But then, how do you actually make those decisions work? Having a great plan is one thing, but you've got to be able to execute to get everyone on board.
And that's where the muscle comes in. Remember, we talked about Ome's observation about Western companies sometimes focusing too much on planning and not enough on execution?
Yeah, that separation of muscle from brain idea. It's like having a fancy car, but the engine doesn't work.
Exactly. He saw a different approach in a lot of Japanese companies where there was much more focus on getting things done, on execution.
It's like the difference between talking about climbing a mountain and actually, putting on your hiking boots and doing it.
And he even says that some Western companies have too much strategic planning, which can lead to them overthinking things and not being able to adapt quickly to changes.
They get so focused on making the perfect plan that they never actually, I don't know, use it.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance between thinking and doing.
And building a culture where doing things, taking action, is just as important as the planning part. It's not enough to have a good strategy. You need a team that can actually make it happen.
That's it. It's about giving people the power to take ownership, to be part of the process, to feel like they're contributing to the company's success.
So how do you create that kind of culture? What are the ingredients?
Omai says it's super important to communicate clearly, to make sure everyone understands the vision and is working towards the same goals.
Get everyone rowing in the same direction.
Yeah. And to create an environment where people feel comfortable taking risks, trying new things, even if they might fail. It's about encouraging that entrepreneurial spirit within a company.
If everyone's too afraid to make a mistake, you'll never innovate.
Right. And it's important to celebrate when things go well, to recognize what people contribute, and to build a culture where you're always trying to improve. It's not about being perfect, it's about always getting better.
It sounds like leadership is crucial here. It takes a good leader to create an environment where people feel valued and trusted and empowered to make a difference.
Absolutely. And Ohmae points out how important it is for leaders to be able to inspire people, to communicate that vision clearly, and to create that feeling of everyone being united and working towards the same mission.
It's not just about the strategy itself. It's about having the right people and the right culture to make that strategy work. It's like, I don't know, a recipe where
Mhm.
you need all the right ingredients to make something delicious.
That's a great way to put it. And speaking of ingredients, there's another key element of strategic thinking we should talk about: creativity.
Ah, that spark of innovation.
Yeah.
But is creativity something you can actually, develop? Some people just seem naturally creative, don't they?
There are definitely differences between people, but Ohmae says that even people who don't think of themselves as creative types can learn to think outside the box.
So we can all tap into that inner innovator, even if it's been hidden for a while.
We can. And he lays out three conditions that are really important for fostering creativity. First, he calls it an initial charge. It's that spark of inspiration, that burst of energy you get when you're excited about an idea or a problem.
Like when you stumble on an idea and you can't stop thinking about it.
Exactly. That's what gets the creative process going. But just having that spark isn't enough. You also need what he calls directional antenna.
So you need to be able to see where the idea might lead.
Right. It's about being sensitive to trends, to opportunities, those little hints that other people might miss. It's about seeing the potential in something that other people might overlook.
It's like having a sixth sense for innovation.
And then the third condition is what he calls a capacity to tolerate static.
Static, like interference or resistance.
Exactly. It's about being able to stick with an idea even when you face doubt or criticism, even when you hit roadblocks.
So creativity isn't just about those light bulb moments. It's about having the toughness to push through the challenges and actually turn those ideas into something real.
Exactly. He uses some good examples to illustrate this. There's Dr. Tatishi, who had this incredible knack for sensing flow, anticipating problems before they even happened. And then there's Soichiro Honda, who wouldn't give up on developing that clean engine even when everyone told him it was impossible.
They had this unshakable belief in their ideas and the willingness to make them happen no matter what.
They weren't afraid to question the accepted way of doing things and push those boundaries of what was possible.
So we've talked about foresight, execution, and creativity. It feels like we're getting a pretty good picture of what makes a strategic thinker. You mentioned earlier how impressed Ohmae was by how Japanese companies did things. What else can we learn from them?
Oh, there's a lot to learn from how they approach strategy. One thing Ohmae really highlights is their strategic use of technology. And it's not just about having the newest gadgets. It's about using technology in a way that supports their goals.
So it's not technology for its own sake. It's about using it as a tool to get things done.
Exactly. He talks about how Japanese companies are really good at licensing and adapting existing technology to get an edge. They understand they don't have to invent everything from scratch. Sometimes it's smarter to build on what's already out there.
It's like building on what others have already done, right?
Right. And they're also great at taking this step-by-step approach to marketing, starting small with specific segments and gradually growing instead of trying to conquer the whole market at once.
It's like building momentum, testing the waters before you jump in.
Exactly. Ohmae also points out how they're good at managing their finances, keeping that leverage high, while also keeping their eye on those long-term growth opportunities.
It's playing the long game, not getting distracted by quick wins.
And finally, he talks about how good they are at choosing their battles. They try to avoid direct confrontations and instead look for those areas where they can really create an advantage.
They're strategic about how they compete. They know when to fight and when to, outmaneuver.
Exactly. And these are all lessons that any business can use, no matter what industry they're in or where they are in the world.
So it's not about copying the Japanese model exactly. It's about understanding what made them successful and using those principles in your own situation. It's like taking a recipe from a great chef and adding your own personal touch.
That's a great way to think about it, and that's what makes the mind of the strategist so helpful. It's not a rule book, it's more like a way of thinking, some principles that you can apply in a lot of different situations.
It's about developing that strategic mindset, being able to see the bigger picture, anticipate the challenges and the opportunities, and make the decisions that will help your company succeed.
And that leads us to the final piece of the puzzle, which is developing a strong strategic vision. It's about more than just having a plan. It's about having that clear sense of purpose, being able to see beyond the horizon, and guiding your company towards its future.
All right, so we're back. We've been covering a lot of ground with Kenichi Ohmae's The Mind of the Strategist, from those key factors for success to navigating that strategic triangle.
And we've talked about how to, develop foresight, how to execute effectively, and even how to spark that creativity.
But now it's time to tackle the big one, strategic vision. We hear that phrase all the time, but what does it really mean? To have that crystal clear sense of where you're going, being able to see beyond what's right in front of you and guide your company towards those big goals.
It's interesting. People talk about strategic vision like it's some kind of, I don't know, magical power that only certain people have.
Yeah.
But Omai says it's much more down to earth than that. It's not about looking into a crystal ball. It's about developing a way of thinking, a mindset that's all about analysis, challenging those assumptions we all have, and always looking for ways to create value.
So it's less about having all the answers and more about asking the right questions
Exactly.
and being open to the idea that those answers might change as things change around you.
Right. A strong strategic vision isn't something you write down and forget about. It's something that guides your decisions, helps you prioritize what's important, and keeps you on track even when things get tough.
Remember that analogy Ohmae uses, the one about the deer in the headlights?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
He compares companies without a clear vision to a deer that's frozen in fear, can't react to the danger. It's a reminder that not taking action or just following everyone else can be just as bad as making the wrong move.
Definitely.
It's like that saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. But in business, that can be dangerous.
It can be fatal. Having a strategic vision is about shaping your own future, steering your company towards where you want to be, not just reacting to what's happening around you.
Okay, but how do you actually develop this strategic vision? Where do you even start?
Well, Ome says it starts with challenging those constraints, those things that we often think of as limits we can't overcome. It's about pushing past those boundaries, questioning those assumptions that might be holding us back.
So asking, what if those limits didn't exist? Like giving yourself permission to dream big, even if it seems impossible right now.
Exactly. And then figuring out how to deal with those obstacles. It's about being ambitious, but also having a plan to make it happen.
So it's like having both the big dream and the practical steps to get there.
Right?
It's not just about those external constraints, though, right? There are also internal ones, those beliefs we have that can hold us back just as much.
Absolutely. Ome is all about questioning those strategic assumptions, those things we just accept as the way things are. He loves asking why all the time. Why do we do things this way? Is there a better way? It's about challenging the status quo and looking for new perspectives that could lead to those breakthrough moments.
So being intellectually curious is a key part of strategic vision. Being willing to get out of your comfort zone and explore new possibilities.
Definitely. And it's not just about questioning things for no reason. It's about being open to new ideas, new ways of thinking, and new ways
Uh-huh.
to solve problems.
It's about being humble enough to admit that you don't know everything
Uh-huh.
and being willing to learn from others. So we've got to challenge those constraints, question those assumptions. What else is important for developing that strategic vision?
This one's crucial, especially nowadays with how fast things change. Omei talks about how important it is to anticipate those future trends, to understand the forces that are shaping the world and how they're going to affect your company in the long run.
So it's about being proactive,
Yeah.
staying ahead of the game, instead of just reacting after something has already happened. It's like surfing. You've got to see the wave coming to stay on top of it.
Exactly. It's about developing those directional antennae we talked about earlier, being able to pick up on those little signals, connecting the dots between things that might seem unrelated to get a better sense of what's coming next.
It's like detective work.
Right. And then you use those insights to make your decisions, to guide your actions, to make sure your company is ready for what's coming.
So strategic vision is about knowing where you want to go, being willing to question what you think you know, and being able to see those future trends coming. It's about being proactive, adaptable, and always looking for ways to create value.
It's about a way of thinking that embraces change, that looks for new possibilities, and that's brave enough to go after those big opportunities that will shape a better future.
It's amazing how relevant Ohmae's ideas still are, even after all these years. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the mind of the strategist, what are some of the key things our listeners should remember?
Well, he reminds us that strategic thinking isn't a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process. You've got to keep analyzing the situation, adapting your approach, and being willing to challenge those assumptions that might be holding you back.
And it's about always thinking analytically, being open to new ideas, and having the courage to make those bold decisions that will differentiate you from everyone else.
And remember, even the best strategy in the world is useless if you don't have the right people and the right culture to make it happen.
Ohmae's insights are so powerful for navigating the business world, and they're not just for CEOs or executives. These are principles that anyone can use at any level in any industry.
So as you go on your own strategic journeys, remember to think analytically, challenge those assumptions, and cultivate that strategic vision that will guide you to success.
And never stop learning and growing. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the mind of the strategist. Until next time, keep those strategic minds sharp.